I've been hearing this point of view presented by some people recently, and they often think of it as a more intelligent or elevated or evolved point of view. And this is the idea that, look, the weights don't really matter when you're exercising or lifting. What really matters is kind of your control and your form. And like I said, it's often presented as like this evolved idea above the kind of more weight-centric kind of Neanderthal logic of, lift heavy weights, unga bunga type of thing. And I kind of want to challenge that and dive a little deeper into that logic, because there's often just kind of two camps that get created in the fitness industry, and I think any kind of content creation sphere. And it's often just to generate and drive more content, discussion, and engagement. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I think it's useful to kind of come up with thought experiments and play devil's advocate, create these thought experiments, have discussions, insofar as it's helping you kind of get closer to the truth or try to figure out a more nuanced view. Obviously, it's problematic when it's just done just to pump out content and just confuse people. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about basically this idea of form versus weight. Why I'm going to talk about why I think it's a false dichotomy, but why possibly the weight actually matters more in this kind of point of view is a bit misguided. But obviously there's some truth to it, and then there's some aspects that are a bit more problematic. So, ultimately though, I do think the weight matters a lot. It's one of the things that matters the most, but there's more aspects to it that matter as well. And I'm going to argue that it's kind of a false dichotomy, because we have this idea of there's a debate between two camps of movement optimism and kind of which is this idea that really what matters is the dosage of weight. You can round your back on lifts, you can do any type of form, and really what matters more is using the proper amount of weight. And then the other side is this more science-based or biomechanics-based camp, which is kind of positing that it's the angle that you're moving at, the form, biasing certain things that are found in exercise science studies, like, the lengthened position of a muscle maybe leads to a bit more gains. And so people go really heavy into that. And then kind of the intensity or the form seems to kind of matter less to these people. Of course, I think these are both kind of straw man versions of it. And in reality, a lot of people that are smart and making good progress are probably using a mix of both, whether it's by design and by their own thought process and model, or just being intuitive with their bodies. That's where a lot of people end up. But anyway, that's basically the dichotomy of the two camps. You can think of it as quality or quantity in a way, like quantity being more about intensity, pushing heavier weights. Doesn't really matter too much what the form is. And then quality being, let's be really controlled with everything. Don't necessarily need to go to failure. The weight isn't as important as long as we're really controlling. Okay, so to be a little bit charitable to the view of weights not mattering, they don't matter in a sense. And there is some truth to this idea of being like, okay, don't worry about the weight, just worry about the control and the form. Let me fix this. So they don't matter in the sense that you shouldn't be comparing it to someone else's weight necessarily. And the weight that you use is not synonymous with having bigger muscles or stronger muscles in that movement. So I could have a worse bench press than someone in the sense of moving less weight than them, but I could possibly have better, more developed pecs and shoulders, and I could possibly even seem or be stronger in a different context that also involves pushing. That's not the bench press. And that's because what leads to the amount of tension that is on the muscles that you're trying to develop, weight is a part of that, but there are other factors as well, like the lengths of your limbs. I might be able to place a lot more tension on my pecs with less weight than someone else just because of my morphology, and also the way that I'm intentionally moving my body, rib cage shape, and your form. Basically, a lot of people, let's take bench press as an example, are going to do things to increase the weight they can use, but that will also take tension off the pecs, like really compressing the backside of their body, doing a huge arch might take away some range of motion, which is another variable in this kind of formula that determines how much tension is on the muscle and how much that muscle will grow. But also by kind of squeezing and compressing your shoulder blades and your upper back, you're changing the shape of your rib cage, you're changing the amount of stress and tension that goes through your pecs in favor of other muscles and other structures in your body. So that's a strategy to move more weight. That's taking tension off the target muscle. So that's just an example of the weight not telling you the full picture of what's actually going on at the muscle level and how things are going to develop as you train that way over time. And this is why a lot of power lifters might not have as impressive or developed areas of their physique as a bodybuilder might have. But the flip side of that is a bodybuilder is still going to be very strong and still going to need heavier and heavier weights as they get bigger and stronger. So yeah, that's a bit of kind of giving a bit of charity to the weights don't matter camp because they don't fully matter. But at the same time, they do matter in order to be able to get a good enough stimulus to the muscles. So an individual hopefully will be using heavier weights over time throughout their lifting career as they get stronger. But if what they care about is building muscle and strength in certain parts of their bodies, the weight is not the only factor that leads to that. You can be increasing the weight. Like, this is one of the problems with trying to beat your record and always trying to add more weight to the bar, which is a great mindset to have at the start to learn intensity and learn how to push yourself hard enough and realize that, oh, I am getting stronger as I go. But what you don't want to do is be so obsessed with that process of adding more weight that you start to change your form, add other muscles in that might actually be taking tension off the muscles that you're trying to train. And so you're writing down in your logbook that you're making progress, but you're really actually potentially going backwards in that sense. So you can think about how important quantity or the overall load is just by doing a quick thought experiment of imagining that you have perfect form in some exercise. Using way too much weight, even if your form is perfect, will crush you and injure you. And using way too little weight will lead you nowhere. If you're just, doing perfect bicep curls with a pencil, it doesn't matter if your form is perfect. You're not going to make any progress whatsoever. And so that's where, if you're going to kind of choose one camp to live in, probably better to care a little bit more about the intensity and the weight that you're using and how much you're pushing, because that will probably lead you to better results than moving, with zero effort, leaving 10 reps in reserve on all your sets, but using perfect form. Kind of a waste of time. You might be getting a little bit of like cardio and movement, but you might as well do that with something more fun than lifting weights, in my opinion. That being said, you don't want to be an idiot and be so obsessed with adding more weight that you're using different parts of your body to move it. You're not able to actually track your progress in terms of like keeping consistent form and momentum and control, so that the weight moving up and the reps moving up is actually indicative of that muscle getting stronger. So you need to balance two sides of that spectrum there. Be really concerned about the intensity and how much weight you're moving, but also realize that your form and biomechanics is a part of what determines how much tension is being applied to that muscle. And the weight that we're using is just a tool to apply tension to whatever muscle we want to grow and get stronger. So you can't really uncouple the two. The weight that you're using is a big part of the formula and the amount of reps that you're doing, but the form and how you're organizing your body, how you're executing the movement, is what's determining where that weight goes in your body. If you're overly concerned with one or the other, you're going to be missing out on a lot of gains and a lot of progress. Just to close it off, what we're doing when we're trying to build muscle and strength is take our sets close enough to failure, which is something that, a critique of some of these more science-based people might be that they're trying to kind of sell this as a way to help people avoid intensity and avoid the hard work of pushing close to failure, because that's what a lot of people don't want to do, and that's what they need to learn to do. So what we're doing when we're trying to build muscle and strength is take our sets close enough to failure, and the failure needs to be for a particular reason. If we want a certain muscle or a group of muscles to grow and get stronger, they need to be fatiguing throughout the set, and that needs to be the reason that the set ends. That needs to be the reason for failing the set. And what's going to lead to targeting a certain muscle group and making that be the failure point is using an appropriate weight, but also maintaining your form and the mechanics of your movement consistently enough so that that muscle and those structures in your body are what is receiving the tension from the weights that you're using. So they both go together. You need to do both, but if I was going to pick one to focus on more, it is a little bit more of that intensity and that weight, because you can start to cheat and use a little bit of improper form, and yes, maybe that is a little bit higher injury risk, but you are going to make gains that way versus using completely too little of intensity, too light of weight. It's all relative to the individual. And if someone is, early in their journey, older, very weak, a light weight might be heavy for them, and that's great. But if they're using way too light of a weight for them, where they're not even getting to the point where their reps are slowing down at the end of the set, there's no effort or intensity involved, they might as well just be going for a walk or something. It's not going to lead to any muscle gain. So, just to provide a little nuance between the two, you got to balance these two sides of the spectrum. Use appropriate weights and intensity. Make sure your form and control and mechanics are good enough. These two things basically need to be good enough. They don't need to be perfect, but you don't want to be too far in one or the other. So hope that's useful. And yeah, check out the links in the description below. If you want any help figuring out this stuff on your own, you can apply for coaching or check out some of my free and cheap programs and things that I'll have up in that link. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.